Welcome to tonight's bedtime story. In this gentle journey you are Ludwig van Beethoven. The year is 1824. Vienna is cold, quiet and listening. In your cramped apartment, pages of music cover every surface. You can barely hear the creak of the floorboards or the birds outside your window. But inside, your mind is alive with sound. Tonight you are about to finish your most daring work. A symphony born from silence, stitched together by memory, hope and defiance. If you enjoy stories like this, leave a like and let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is over there. We'd love to hear from you. Now, close your eyes, let the candlelight flicker, let the music swell, and let Beethoven's world carry you into sleep. You're born on a cold December evening in the electorate of Cologne, in the modest town of Bonn. Snow dusts the rooftops, and the scent of wood smoke drifts through the crooked cobblestone streets. The church bells ring out softly in the distance as your mother cradles you beneath the low beams of your family's apartment. Her hands are thin, her breath warm against your cheek. She hums to you, gently, a lullaby handed down from the Rhine. Her voice is music before you understand what music is. Your father, Johann, is not as gentle. He is a court musician, and though the wine on his breath makes him clumsy, he dreams of something grander. He has seen what a child prodigy can become. He has heard of the boy Mozart in Salzburg. He looks at you not as a son, but as a future, as something to mould. By the time you're 4, your small fingers are already pressing into the stiff keys of a clavier. You sit on a wooden stool, feet dangling. The cold air nips at your neck as your father corrects you with sharp words, sometimes sharper hands. The metronome hasn't been invented yet, but you know the rhythm of fear. Still, there are moments, brief, shining moments, when your fingers find the right combination and the sound that escapes is beautiful. Those moments are yours. The household is tight and loud. You share your days with your younger brothers, Caspar and Nicholas, and with the echoes of your father's temper. But your mother, sweet Maria Magdalena, is your refuge. She touches your hair softly when you cry. She wraps you in her shawl when the wind screams down the streets at night. She dies when you're still young, and though you do not yet have the words for grief, you carry that quiet loss in you, deep and permanent, like a root buried in frozen soil. By the time you're 7, your father pushes you onto stages. Bonn's salons are filled with candlelight and perfume. Aristocrats lean forward in velvet coats and lace cuffs. Their faces blur in the flickering light. Your hands sweat. Your fingers dance. You bow when you're told, and the applause is for the marvel of a child, not for you. As the years pass, the clavier becomes less of a prison and more of a sanctuary. The notes begin to arrange themselves more willingly beneath your hands. You learn to listen not only to the sound, but to the shape of silence between the notes. You begin to compose, small things at first, and your mind feels sharper when you do. Like the world is made of patterns, and music is the key to seeing them. At 11, you take your first official post as assistant court organist under Christian Gottlob Niefe, who recognises your talent and treats you with something like respect. He lends you books. He introduces you to the works of Bach, of Haydn. You study them like scripture. You write your first published composition. Your name appears in print. It is small, but it is yours. The palace of the Elector is your second home. Its echoing halls smell of polished wood and candle wax. You play before the nobles, learn court etiquette, listen to political chatter you barely understand. Revolution is stirring across Europe, but you're still a boy in breeches, chasing echoes into marble chambers. You become known as the boy who never smiles, not out of arrogance, but because there is too much to do, too much to become. You are not content with being merely gifted. You want to carve your own language in music. You want to write things no one else has ever dared. At 14, you begin to understand the limits of Bonn. You have outgrown it. Vienna calls to you like a distant overture. That is where Mozart lives. That is where geniuses go. You convince the Elector to send you, And one cold day, with a violin case in one hand and your heart beating like a timpani in your chest, you leave your brothers behind and begin the journey east. Vienna is vast and loud, a city of carriages, courtyards and operas. You find Mozart just briefly. He listens to you play. He says something soft and strange. Keep your eyes on him. He'll make noise in the world some day. You do not stay long. Your mother's death and your father's worsening drinking drag you back to Bonn. When you return, everything feels smaller. Your father loses his post. You become the head of the family, providing through performances, teaching, whatever you can. You're 16, and adulthood wraps around your shoulders like a damp cloak. You write music in the early hours before the city wakes. You walk along the Rhine and imagine a future where you will not only play for nobles, but stand apart from them. Your music will not decorate rooms, it will move people, change them. There is a stiffness in your ears sometimes, like cotton stuffed in your head. You ignore it. You compose more, you play better, but your gaze is fixed on Vienna, still distant, still waiting. Haydn is there now, master of symphonies. You long to study under him, to sharpen your sound under his direction. In 1792, the Elector sends you once again. This time, you know you will not return. You do not look back when you leave Bonn. The river flows behind you. The boy from Bonn is becoming something else. Not yet deaf, not yet famous, not yet broken or immortal, but close. The carriage rattles. Your fingers twitch against your knee. You're humming something new. A few bars, a shadow of what will become a symphony. No one else can hear it yet, but you can. And that, you think, is enough. The wheels of the carriage crack against the frozen ground as you arrive in Vienna. This time, there is no one waiting for you. No family, no familiar faces, just the wind sweeping through the alleys and the sound of distant music echoing from open windows. You step out, violin in one hand, notebook in the other, and the city inhales you like smoke. Vienna is not like Bonn. The streets are broader, the buildings taller, and every salon hides a patron or composer of fame. You walk past candlelit windows where men in powdered wigs debate art and revolution. Carriages clatter over cobblestones, and beneath it all you hear the pulse of music. Waltzes in the taverns, quartets in the palaces, symphonies behind closed doors. You begin under the wing of Joseph Haydn. He is kind but distant, more teacher than guide. His rooms smell of ink and boiled potatoes. You present your compositions with trembling hands. He offers a raised brow, a short nod, a word or two of correction. You want fire, but you receive method. And so, you teach yourself the rest. Your days stretch long, mornings filled with scales and manuscripts, afternoons with lessons and meals eaten quickly in the corners of salons, evenings filled with performance after performance. Your name begins to echo among the city's elite. They call you bold, even impetuous, not because of your manners, which are awkward, but because your music refuses to sit still. It leaps, it burns, it insists on being felt. You perform with fury. The piano is no longer a polite instrument under your fingers. You attack it, coaxing out emotion that feels almost violent in its truth. At one evening performance, a string snaps mid-area. The audience gasps. You keep playing. Another string snaps. Still you continue, pounding out the coda with such intensity that the keyboard rattles under your hands. When you stand to bow, breathless and soaked with sweat, they are silent. Then, a burst of applause, startled and thunderous. You smile, not because you enjoy the praise, but because you have forced them to feel what you felt. But there are other sounds, quieter ones, that begin to bother you. A high ringing, a murmur that does not come from the room. At first, you dismiss it as fatigue. You've been composing late into the night, squinting by candlelight, scribbling notes until they blur on the page. But one morning, as you walk along the Danube with your coat buttoned tight against the wind, you realise you can hear the river with your eyes, not your ears. The rush of water is there, but only in your memory, not your senses. You try to ignore it. You smile more forcefully in company. You speak a little louder than necessary, but only sometimes. You keep composing. You begin your trio in C minor, then a piano sonata, then another. The pages pile up. The melodies come freely. Your hands are steady, your mind sharp, but that ringing never leaves. You become a fixture in the salons, not for your wit or your fashion, but for the force of your playing. You are awkward, even brusque. You speak bluntly. You hate small talk, and yet people invite you back. Not because you flatter, but because you are honest. Your music does not play to please, it plays to reveal. You say more in the notes than you could ever manage in words. In 1795 you publish your 3 piano trios opus 1. They are performed in the homes of the wealthy, and you watch from the corner, arms crossed, listening to your thoughts made public. The applause is genuine. You're no longer the boy from Bonn, you're Beethoven, Vienna's boldest young composer. Patrons begin to offer support. Prince Lichnowsky opens his doors and his purse. He calls you a genius. You accept his favour with discomfort. You hate being beholden, yet the support allows you to write more freely. His salon becomes a place of creation, and you begin to compose works that swell beyond what the court expects. Quartets, sonatas, string arrangements that crackle with invention. But the ringing grows louder. By 1798, you no longer trust your ears. In conversation, you nod often, too often. You begin to withdraw. You write notes in journals not meant for music, but for understanding. Say again, you scribble. Speak louder. Don't let them see. You take to walking long distances alone, through woods and along river paths, where you do not have to pretend to hear. You carry a notebook always, not just for music, but for thoughts, for saving what still lives untouched in your mind. You begin to fear that what you are losing cannot be recovered. And yet, you write. You compose your Pathétique sonata, bold and stormy, filled with contrasts that mimic your own swelling panic and defiance. Audiences are stunned. Critics do not know what to make of it. But you're not writing for critics. You are writing because you must. Late at night, the streets of Vienna fall silent. You sit alone at the piano in your room, the candles burn down to stubs. You cannot hear the birds anymore. You cannot hear the clink of glasses in the taverns below. But when your fingers touch the keys, you still feel the vibration. You still remember the way it once sounded. The music is inside you now more than ever. That is where it must live. You're 28. The world thinks you're at your peak, and in some ways they are right. But you are beginning to understand the shape of the silence ahead. And yet, even as it approaches, you press deeper into the sound. You begin to chart your life by what you can no longer hear. At first it is the soft things, the rustle of a letter being opened, the clink of a spoon against porcelain, a bird in a high branch on a spring morning, just outside your window. You squint toward the sound as if vision might help you hear it, but it's already gone. You do not speak of it, not yet. The world still sees you as Vienna's most daring pianist, the young lion of the salons. You perform with a violence that borders on ecstasy, and your compositions are growing darker, richer, stranger. But in private you feel the ground slipping beneath you. Music is a world of air, and your access to it is fading. Your body betrays you slowly. The ringing in your ears becomes a scream some nights, a piercing, invisible scream. You try everything. Herbs from quacks, cold baths in the river, placing wooden sticks between your teeth to try to feel the vibrations more clearly. You sit for hours with hot cloths pressed against your neck. None of it helps. The silence is coming, but your mind will not stop. If anything, it sharpens. When you're alone, the ideas pour in. In the mornings, you walk the city's edge, boots dusted in dew, coat pulled close to your chest. You hum, not aloud, but within yourself. Melodies that no one has written before, echoes of something vast and ancient and entirely your own. You imagine whole symphonies in your head, and scribble them down later, hoping your memory has served you faithfully. You develop a habit of speaking harshly. Some call you rude, others call you mad. You do not care. When words are strained, when sounds deceive you, why waste time dressing them up? Better to let silence settle, even if it makes people uncomfortable. You rent rooms that are always on the top floor. Higher means quieter. You avoid taverns now. You no longer play at social games. Instead, you retreat to your notebooks, endless notebooks, where you write everything down. Conversations, questions, bits of thought and pages of music. In ink, your world still exists exactly as you remember it. You begin to carry the notebooks everywhere, not just for sketches, but for interaction. When people speak, and you cannot catch their words, you pass them a pen. It is humiliating. You're a man of sound forced to depend on the page for meaning. You hide the worst of it. The world must not know. Patrons continue to commission you, and audiences fill small halls to hear your latest sonatas and string quartets. They do not see you wince when the violins hit their highest notes. They do not know you cannot hear the full range of your own compositions. Then comes the letter. You write it not to anyone specific, but as a kind of testament. It is 1802, and you're in Heiligenstadt, a village just outside the city, where the wind moves through the trees like a low symphony, and the air is clean enough to hope. You stay in a modest house near fields where children chase each other and farmhands shout across rows of vines. You hear almost none of it. You write, "I would have ended my life. It was only my art that held me back." The words bleed onto the page like confession. You write to your brothers, though you never send it. You speak of your loneliness, your despair. You speak of how close you have come to surrendering to the silence. But also of something else, a vow. You will live, not because life is bearable, but because your music is not yet finished. You call it the Heiligenstadt Testament, and though the world will not see it for decades, it marks the turning. The moment where your art becomes not an expression of joy, but a weapon against oblivion. When you return to Vienna, you're not healed, but you are certain. You begin to compose with a new intensity. The Second Symphony bursts forth, lighter in mood but complex in structure. Some critics say it lacks delicacy. You smirk at that. There is no delicacy in surviving. You're shaping thunder with a pen, not painting flowers. The loss in your ears becomes a kind of mirror. You begin to hear from within, not in echoes of the world, but in images and abstractions. Music is no longer sound. It is architecture. And you are designing cathedrals. There are whispers about your behaviour. You pace late at night. You argue in the street. You respond to questions no one asked. But always, always, you write. The music is the only truth you trust. You fall in love once or twice, though it never lasts. Women of good standing find your moods too wild, your manners too poor. You write letters you never send, longing shaped into sentences that never find a reader. You are not meant for a quiet life. You are meant for something else. Each morning you begin again. The candlelight flickers. The ink stains your fingers. The silence presses in. And still, your hand does not stop. You're 32. You've written things no one else could have written. You've lost more than most men will ever know. But you're not done, not even close. You become obsessed with structure, not out of constraint, but out of necessity. When sound is no longer something you can fully trust, you turn to form, architecture in motion. You study fugues again, the mathematics of music, voices weaving in and out of each other like braided light. Your mind holds entire movements now, carefully nested like Russian dolls. You begin to write symphonies not from the piano, but from silence. You build them internally and test them through vibration alone. The window panes in your apartment rattle when you hum against the wood. You listen to your feet on the floorboards. You listen to your chest as it tightens and loosens with rhythm. The world may no longer reach your ears, but it is still alive in your bones. At night the silence grows strange. You hear things that aren't there. Phantom chimes, distant thunder, a violin in another room. You know it's your mind trying to fill the absence. Sometimes it's worse. You wake in cold sweat, convinced a chorus is singing beside your bed. Other times you beg the ringing to stop. You put your head between pillows and scream into the mattress, but even then it stays. You refuse to let anyone see that side of you. By day you wear a thick coat and carry your notebooks. You visit publishers, greet patrons with your stiff, uneven bow, and nod more than you should. When someone asks you something you didn't catch, you laugh as if they've made a joke, but it's exhausting. You begin to avoid gatherings altogether. You tell yourself it's because you need the time. But you know the truth. You can no longer follow a conversation. You can no longer pretend. In the silence, your music changes. The melodies are longer, more daring. Your harmonies grow darker, more complex. You write as if each piece might be your last. Not because you're dying, though part of you wishes you were, but because you can no longer be sure you'll have access to this inner sound forever. It is like trying to hold smoke. You grip the ideas tightly and get them down quickly, afraid they'll vanish the moment your attention slips. You start to hear from new quarters. Composers speak of you now with nervous admiration. Too stormy, some say, too emotional. They prefer the clean elegance of Haydn, the cheerful charm of Mozart, but you're not interested in charm, you're interested in truth, and the truth is not always beautiful. Sometimes it howls. One afternoon, you walk into the countryside beyond Heiligenstadt, notebook in your coat pocket, boots crunching in the dry grass. The trees are bare, and the sky is the colour of stone. You sit on a hill and look out across the valley, your coat pulled tight against the wind. You close your eyes and listen. There is nothing. Not the rustle of the wind, not the call of birds, but still. You can hear the movement you've been working on. A slow theme shaped like a question. It climbs, hesitates, climbs again. You begin to hum softly, tapping your fingers against your knee. You sketch the first few measures there in the field. When you return home, the melody has changed, grown larger. It fills the page. You begin working on a new symphony, the second, but something else stirs beneath it. Something more aggressive, a different sound. A heartbeat that will one day become your fifth. You wake at dawn and compose before the fire is lit. The windows are fogged with your breath. You sharpen your quills. You hum and shape the lines until they feel inevitable. The silence doesn't matter anymore. You're beginning to understand that the silence is part of the process now. It has taken something from you, but it has also given you a clarity few men will ever know. You hear from Haydn less often now. Your teacher is aging. He does not understand the direction your work is taking. You respect him, but you no longer need his approval. You're alone in your vision. That loneliness once terrified you. Now it comforts you. You write letters to your brothers in your mind. Caspar is always distant, and Nicholas never understood your drive. But still, they are blood. You wonder what they would think if they knew what you were living through. The world sees your fame. They do not see the night spent curled on the floor, hands pressed to your ears, pleading with a silence that never ends. Still, you rise, you wash, you write. Your music desk is littered with half-finished scores. You pick one up, a new sonata. The first movement is furious, the second tender. You surprise yourself. Even in the midst of despair, you're capable of joy, or at least the memory of it. You build the rest around that contradiction. That is what art is, after all, the friction between what is and what could be. When friends visit, you are distant. You offer tea but do not join them. You pretend not to be angry when you see their pity. They speak slowly as if you're a child. You nod, and later you burn their letters. It is easier that way. You finish the second symphony in early autumn. It is premiered in Vienna, and though you conduct it, the players know to keep one eye on your hands and one on the music. Your movements are erratic. You cannot always hear their mistakes. But the audience applauds. You bow. You leave the stage before the echoes fade. Back in your room, you sit in the dark. You imagine what it sounded like. You imagine the violins rising, the horns cutting through, the timpani rolling like thunder beneath it all. You smile. Not because you heard it, but because you made it. You gave it to the world, even if the world can't give it back. In your drawer is the unsent letter from Heiligenstadt. You read it once more before placing it in a leather folio. You will keep it. You will not destroy it. It is a reminder of who you were and who you refuse to become. You are not healed, but you are working, and the work is holy. The year is 1803. You're living in a modest apartment on the edge of Vienna, and though your ears have grown quieter, your mind has never been louder. Your thoughts burst with sound, endless arrangements of instruments, harmonies, crescendos that lift the spirit and crush it in the same breath. You're not chasing beauty anymore. You are building monuments. Your fingers are stained with ink, the manuscript pages stacked in every corner of your room. You pace, mutter, hum from memory. There is no piano playing now, not unless you must. It is too cruel. The instrument answers you in dull vibrations, its voice half swallowed, but still you write. The music no longer needs to be heard. It needs to exist. You begin the Eroica Symphony, the most daring thing you've attempted. It begins not with a whisper or an overture, but a blast. 2 bold chords that strike like fists on a table. You do not care if they like it. You are beyond that now. You are writing for something greater, for struggle, for defiance, for truth. At first you dedicate it to Napoleon. He too once stood for revolution, for tearing down the old world. You believed in that. But when word comes that he has crowned himself emperor, not a servant of a liberty, but its ruler, you see the truth. You scratch his name from the title page with a blade, tearing the paper. You will not celebrate tyrants. You will celebrate heroes. Not the kind who wear medals, but the kind who suffer and rise again. You call it the Sinfonia Eroica, a symphony for the heroic. The critics are confused. The length, the scale. It is too much, they say. But others, younger, bolder, understand. They hear something new, something unstoppable, and you do not stop. You write the Wallstein Sonata, then the Appassionata. You're relentless. Each piece holds more than just melody. It holds your fury, your longing, your brokenness, your hope. The notes are not notes anymore. They are pieces of you. Vienna changes around you. The streets are filled with rumours of war. Napoleon has returned, this time not as inspiration, but as invader. The French army enters the city in 1805, and though the citizens tremble, you remain in your room composing. Outside cannons rumble, inside your pen dances. You are working on your only opera, Fidelio, a story of freedom, of justice, of love that resists power. The premiere is a failure. The city is occupied, the people distracted. You bow to silence, not applause. But you do not retreat. You rewrite it again and again, convinced of its worth. You will not abandon your truths just because the world isn't ready for them. More and more your hearing fades, entire octaves vanish. You do not hear birdsong anymore. You do not hear rain. You walk the streets like a ghost, unseen, unsure if you're being spoken to until someone grabs your arm. You begin to use ear trumpets, absurd brass devices you hate but need. They do little. The world is muffled and often distant, and yet the music inside you roars. In 1808 you unveil your 5th symphony. You know it will endure before the first note is ever played. 4 strikes, da-da-da-dum, fate knocking at the door. You cannot hear it as others do, but you know its power. The audience sits stunned. You do not look for their approval. You are already writing the 6th, a pastoral symphony, tender and filled with nature's memory. You write the sound of a brook, of thunder, of birds in flight. Not as they are, but as you remember them. A sonic painting written in exile. You conduct from memory now. You know your musicians better than they know themselves. At rehearsals you shout directions they cannot hear, waving your arms, stomping your foot to mark tempo. They adjust. They learn to read your face, your fury, your passion. You're no longer just a composer, you are a force. Your body begins to betray you in new ways. Your stomach aches, your skin breaks into rashes. You suffer from headaches that blur your vision. You write through all of it. When you cannot sleep, you scribble fugues in the dark. When you cannot eat, you drink coffee. Always precisely 60 beans per cup, counted out like a ritual. You're offered positions elsewhere, in Kassel in Westphalia, but Vienna is your battlefield. You refuse to leave. A group of noblemen, fearing your departure, form a coalition to fund you. They pay you to stay. It is the first time a composer has been treated not as a servant but as an artist, as an essential citizen. You accept, reluctantly. You hate dependence, but you know what it means. You fall in love again, the same way you always do, suddenly, deeply, hopelessly. This time with a woman far above your station. You write her letters in a torrent, unsent, unspeakable. You call her your immortal beloved. Her name is never written. Perhaps it is Giulietta, perhaps Antoni, perhaps no one at all. But the pain is real. She leaves, or never arrives, and you are left alone once more, a man who speaks to music better than to any person. Still, you write. You begin the Seventh Symphony, filled with motion, with rhythm, with ecstatic dance. It is unlike anything you've composed. The energy pours from you in waves. When it is premiered, the second movement, solemn and pulsing, moves the audience to tears. Your reputation spreads, not just in Vienna, but across Europe. You are called the greatest living composer. You do not believe them. You're chasing something higher still, something yet unwritten. You keep your sketches close, filling page after page with fragments. Some will never be finished. Others will be reborn years later. You're laying groundwork for something massive. You can feel it, not in sound, but in shape, in weight. Something with voices, something that speaks not just to ears, but to souls. You are no longer the rising star, you are the mountain. But mountains carry snow and the frost is setting in. Your hearing is nearly gone. Your health falters. You retreat further inward, living more in your scores than in the world. Friends drift away. Even your brothers become strangers. But the music does not leave. It stays. It waits. It grows. The city outside has changed again. Napoleon is gone. Europe is patching itself back together. Kings rise, treaties are signed, borders shift. But inside your mind, the war continues. You wake each day with silence in your ears and storms in your chest. No matter what the world mends, something in you stays shattered. And yet, you rise. You wash your face. You sharpen your quill. Because something calls you from beyond even the worst of it. A theme. You've carried it for years. 4 notes, simple, ascending, da-da-da-da. It haunts you not with terror, but with possibility. You do not know yet what it will become, only that it has never left you. The years between 1813 and 1817 pass in fragments. Your health worsens, you collapse often, your bowels torment you. At times, you cannot leave bed. At others, you rise with unnatural strength, driven by obsession. You fight with your publisher, you lose friends, you gain nothing but solitude. Your brother dies. Karl, he leaves behind his son, your nephew. You take the boy in, determined to give him discipline, focus, a future. But he is not you. He resents the pressure, rebels, disappears for days. You try again. He returns sullen and broken. You feel your anger build, not at him, but at fate. That even now, at the edge of all you have built, you cannot love the way others do. Still, you write. You write the Hammerklavier Sonata, vast and impossible, a mountain of sound, a declaration of your continued will. Few can even play it. Fewer still understand it. That doesn't matter. It isn't for them. It's for the silence. It's for the stars. The symphony grows. At first, it is only the structure you sketch. 4 movements, the first filled with struggle, the second with speed, the third with sorrow, the fourth unknown. You hum melodies into your teeth. You press your palm to the table to feel vibration. You do not hear the sounds. You imagine their shape. It is enough. You decide it must have voices, not just instruments, but human beings singing of joy, of unity, of brotherhood. You remember Schiller's Ode to Joy. You've known it since youth. You now return to it like a prayer. The words speak to you differently now. Not as a poet, but as a man who has lived through the collapse of nations and the withering of his own body. All men become brothers. You laugh bitterly the first time you write it. You do not believe it, not fully, but perhaps that's the point. To write what should be, even if it isn't. The work consumes you. Years pass. You're ill so often now you forget what it was like to be well. Your liver swells. You lose your appetite. Your eyes sting with constant inflammation. You speak to few. You grow paranoid. You think of locking your nephew's bedroom door from the outside. You begin to write everything twice in case the first draft vanishes. Still, the music grows. The final movement begins to take shape. A tempest. The themes from the previous movements swirl and clash. Then, silence. A pause. A new melody. The theme of joy. It emerges like a dawn, slow and patient. It spreads, and then voices, baritone, tenor, chorus, not in Latin or Italian, but in German, in your language, in the language of your people. You're told the idea is madness, a symphony with singers, unheard of. Audiences won't understand, conductors won't know what to do. You say nothing, you keep writing. By 1823 it is complete, the 9th Symphony. You look at the pages stained with sweat, tremors in the ink. You have no way of knowing how it will truly sound. Only faith. Faith in your own mind. Faith in those who will carry it to life. You cannot conduct it, not fully, but you insist on standing before the orchestra. May 7th, 1824. The Theatre am Kärntner is full. People know what this is. You stand at the conductor's podium, moving your hands with fury, out of time, unhearing. Behind your back, a second conductor shadows you quietly, keeping the players together. The music explodes, the hall trembles, the joy theme arrives, bold and soaring. The audience is stunned. But you hear none of it. At the end, when the final chord crashes and fades, the room erupts in applause. You're still facing the orchestra, unaware. One of the soloists turns you around gently. You see them, thousands of hands raised, mouths open, people standing. You bow. They say it was the most human moment they had ever seen. In your room that night you sit in silence, holding a copy of the score. You cannot hear. You're alone. But your body vibrates with something else. Something more than sound, something permanent. You have done what no man has done. You have sung without a voice. Your world has narrowed to a few rooms. The walls are lined with music paper and dust. Your hearing is gone, completely. There is no more illusion of sound, no faint echoes, no imagined ringing. Only silence, thick, absolute. And yet within it, you still hear everything. You have grown older, your body's worn, the liver aches, the stomach rebels. Some days you can't hold down food. The doctors give you tonics and syrups and advice, but none of it helps. You live in a room above the street, a single window offering a view of chimney smoke and rooftops. The sound of horses, footsteps, life. All of it moves past you now like the wind through glass. But the music hasn't stopped. You rise in the cold and sit by the stove, your legs wrapped in wool, your fingers crooked from pain. You dip the quill and press it to the paper. Even if your hand shakes, you are composing again. A final surge, a reckoning, the late quartets. They are different from everything that came before. Strange, fragmented, at times so bare they seem to vanish into air, and other times so violent they threaten to shatter the strings. The musicians complain, They say the music makes no sense. Too difficult, too emotional. You don't answer them. You only write. You sketch the grosse fuge, a fugue so massive, so wild it defies structure. One movement, built of contradictions and chaos. At first, it is rejected. A publisher insists you remove it from the quartet. You argue, but in the end you separate it. Yet part of you smiles. They are not ready. But one day they will be. In these final years, time begins to twist. The hours pass slowly, the weeks disappear. Some days you wake and forget what year it is. Other days you stare at the candle for so long you forget whether it is morning or night. The world visits you in pieces, a letter from a friend, a visit from your nephew Carl, the feel of snow when you open the shutters. Carl troubles you. You have tried to raise him, to guide him. After his father's death, you fought to become his guardian. You thought you could give him purpose, protect him from weakness. But he resents you. He disappears for days, spends your money, returns with empty eyes. You try to lecture him, to love him, to forgive him. But the words don't land. Not like music. Music always lands. You are tired, but not finished. You begin working on a new quartet, Opus 135, and it opens softly like a whisper. The final movement is titled with a question. Must it be? And the answer follows in your hand. It must be. You do not explain it. You don't need to. The music says everything. In March of 1827 the illness deepens, your belly swells, your breath shortens. The pain comes in waves. You lie in bed with the ceiling above you turning to mist. Doctors come and go. They draw fluid. They murmur. You barely listen. One stormy night a bolt of lightning flashes through the window and casts your room in white. Your body jerks, your arm lifts, and then stillness returns. Some say it was your final protest. Others say it was the world's farewell. You slip away days later. The funeral draws thousands. The streets of Vienna fill with mourners. Students carry your coffin. Poets read over it. Musicians weep. You're lowered into the earth beneath a grey sky, surrounded by those who never truly knew what it was like to live in silence, but who, because of you, heard something eternal. Your music lives. It echoes long after the applause ends. It becomes the language of sorrow and triumph, of joy and struggle. It speaks where words fail. It reaches those you never met, across continents and centuries. And somewhere, always, it begins again with silence.